Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President of the European Parliament, Mr. President of the European Commission, commissioners, ministers, honourable members. I'm very happy and honoured to be able to reply to your invitation, Mr. President, and to use this opportunity to engage in an open and free debate on the situation of our continent in a very special time. An open and free debate because I've already made speeches. There was my speech in the Sorbonne, and I think an exchange of views is essential in this place where each and every day you make our Europe come alive in all its variety, differences of opinion, agreements, and of course by putting together the compromises which allow us to make progress. The context is really rather special, and that's why our responsibility is all the greater. We have a context of division and indeed doubt within Europe. Brexit continues. It's still being discussed and worked on. In here, I would pay tribute to the work being performed by Michel Barnier. But there is doubt in a number of European countries. And month after month, we're seeing views and sensibilities emerge which call into question certain fundamentals. There seems to be a sort of European civil war. National selfishness and egotism seems to take precedence over what brings us together. There is a fascination with the illiberal, and that's growing all the time. I'm going to come back to this. There are geopolitical threats too. I'm sure we'll come to that in the discussion. So Europe has a ever greater responsibility. There are international conflicts. We're seeing that in the Levant and the Sahel, and we're seeing the emergence of authoritarian powers with a clear strategy which seeks to call into question the multilateral system where Europe takes its place. And that's, of course, the framework within which Europe can exercise influence. And that's also the framework which we built up to establish peace. This debate is taking place at a time of great change and transformation. Digital revolutions, climate change and its consequences, and these also make us call into question the foundation of our industrial societies. They have led to fears, and certain balances are being called into question. I think we've got to rethink the way in which we act. So this moment, I think, makes special responsibility incumbent on us. We can't just make us carry on as if this was just any old debate, just standard debate. Because in the future, we must struggle to defend our ideals. And I want to share with you two deeply held convictions. If we decide to give up on democracy and on attachment to democracy and everything that goes with it, we'll be on the wrong track. We must also be clear that we must build a new European sovereignty which will give a clear and firm response to our citizens and show that we can protect them. We can give a reply to what they're concerned about. Indeed, in this world and in these difficult times, European democracy is our best chance. The worst possible mistake would be to give up on our model and indeed our identity. I dare to say here in Strasbourg and in Brussels, you make this European democracy come alive every day. And this is something mentioned by Tocqueville. This is a democracy that respects the individual, minorities, fundamental rights, which we used to be called liberal democracy, and I would use that term by choice. And there's also the deadly tendency which might lead our continent to the abyss, nationalism, giving up of freedom. And I reject the idea that means that European democracy is condemned to impotence. We're seeing authoritarianism all around us, and the response is not authoritarian democracy, but the authority of democracy. Because this freedom emancipates and frees individuals. Our parliament, this parliament, is a European miracle. It peacefully brings together the elected representatives of the peoples of Europe. You deliberate together, respecting difference, with the heavy weight of our history on us, the history which has at times divided us, and that is a unique model in the world. This is a treasure which we make come alive and which we have kept alive for more than 70 years. Let's not get used to it. We've taken all sorts of risks and gone through the very worst to arrive at this point. And to be even more specific, look around. Let's compare each other. Compare Europe with the other powers, which some are fascinated by because they allegedly are efficient. Where else in the world are there these same requirements? Financial, diplomatic, geopolitical, economic, this obligation to respect minorities, equality between men and women, respect for minorities, respect for private life. Where else is this so well developed in the world with this level of vitality and strength? Yes, there are divisions within countries and within this hemicycle. But over and above these divisions, this democratic model brings us together. It is unique in the world. The identity of Europe is more than just a democracy that defends freedom. It's a culture that is unique in the world, which entails a passion for freedom and, of course, attachment, diversity, ideas, languages, landscapes. This European model is neither dated nor abstract. It is embodied in our commitment to protecting the environment, the climate, health. It's also seen in our approach to digital, because Europeans are committed to innovation, but also protecting private life and privacy. This is an identity which makes us different from authoritarian powers, especially. But today, it also differentiates us from some of our closest allies. Our American ally, we share so much with that country, but this country is rejecting multilateralism, free trade, and climate change. I am convinced that this model is more powerful than ever, but at the same time very fragile, because its strength depends on our commitment, on our being demanding, and we must defend this model together each and every day. So to meet these challenges, the first precondition is truth. Now, people say that Europe, talking about united Europe means fleeing from responsibility. And people say that people don't want Europe. They propose golden roads, yellow brick roads, and they want to take their peoples off on an adventure. Others affirm that we shouldn't rush things too fast, that would be playing the game of the populists. That this is the familiar mood music of paralysis. We've got to be aware of the time and the time we have. I think all of this is terribly wrong. Stoking passions and not proposing alternatives, criticizing without proposals, criticizing without actually coming forward with arguments. People haven't given up on Europe. I think it's the treachery of the clerics that have done this. We've got to listen to the anger of people in Europe. They don't need lectures or education. They need a new project requiring efficiency in the day-to-day. And those that stoke this, they propose the cul-de-sac of the nationalisms that tore us apart in the past. We've seen the consequences in the past. So to breathe new life into European peoples, we must act differently and accept we must act differently. And we must go back to the origins of democracy. Let's look at things full on the face. Fewer than 1 out of 2 citizens vote in European elections. So over the next year, let's structure a proper debate on convictions, on proposals. Today, we cannot act as we did yesterday. And that's to not talk about Europe. Share out the seats. Accuse Brussels and Strasbourg of every ill. Carry on in this manner is a fool's game, which may well be more comfortable for all of us to engage in. But this will not solve any problems. Like you, I believe in the nobility and complexity of democratic choice. As representatives of the people of Europe, you incarnate this, you embody this, you make choices every day, you reach compromises, you put together solutions because you have the mandate of the people. And our shared challenge is to make this European democracy live and be alive. And that's why before the elections and before the election campaigns, we've got to make the debate come alive and create this European public space, which all too often has been left aside. So it was with this in mind to try out new things, to innovate, that I proposed these citizens' consultation exercises as of this year. I'm going to be beginning this exercise this afternoon. It'll be an open and perhaps difficult debate, but a debate that is much needed to look at what brings us together and also what we disagree about, to get away from simplistic alternatives, yes or no, to a question which isn't really looked into, with the implications, the presuppositions that go into it, or anything like it. What we need is a proper democratic and critical debate about our Europe. I welcome the fact that all member states have agreed to join in this initiative. I know that President Juncker and the European Commission is committed to this, so I'm most grateful to it. And I believe your role is very important indeed, Mr. President of the European Parliament. So thank you too. And I would invite each and every one of you in your countries and indeed throughout Europe to participate in this debate, to bring it alive. It's an essential debate because it is essential to keep our democracy alive. And the second conviction I would like to briefly share with you is European sovereignty, the need for European sovereignty. Defending Europe is not defending something abstract or the sort of dilution of our own sovereignties. Rather, it's noting that given the great changes there were, the transformations, given these times, we need an even stronger sovereignty than what we have, something that is complementary but does not substitute our own sovereignty, something that in the face of migration, the lack of security in the planet, environmental and social changes, we can come forward with responses. That's the sovereignty I'm talking about, European sovereignty. It is this that I believe in.
Sur ce sujet,
You've done a lot on this particular topic, and I pay tribute to you. But between now and the end of parliamentary term, spring 2019, we need concrete results on a number of points. Migration. We need to unblock the poison debate on relocation and Dublin. We need to build external and internal solidarity in Europe, because that's what Europe needs. Therefore, I propose we create a European program that will directly provide financial support to local authorities that host and integrate refugees. Secondly, taxing the digital. Following on the Commission's proposal, we'll create a short-term tax that will put an end to the most shocking excesses. I support such a proposal. It is essential, and furthermore, I hope, pave the way for own resources for the future budget.
La réforme de l'Union.
Reforming the economic monetary union is another essential area for work before the end of the parliamentary term. We need a roadmap that will allow us to have a staged approach to banking union and creating a budgetary capacity that will allow for stability and convergence in the Eurozone. Finally, what keeps us together isn't just a treaty or currency, it is a feeling of belonging, a culture, in other words. And here I could cite the creation of European universities. That's making real progress. There's Erasmus, but I'd like to emphasize something that's still being worked on. And there's a house that's copyright, the protecting creators and artistic creation. This flourishing living cultures is part of the vital diversity of our continent, part of our genius. So on these four fronts, this Parliament has a very special responsibility, and you, I think, have grasped what France's position is on this. But over and above this, we need to build this full European sovereignty to protect our citizens in terms of internal, external, and defense security. We've made a lot of progress in recent months, and here I pay tribute to the work that is underway in this House on the European Defence Fund. Given all the tensions we currently face with some of our neighbors, such as Russia, Europe has shown a united face that bespeaks its sovereignty. We must continue down this avenue. Sovereignty is also economic and trade sovereignty. Here too, we've shown unity, and I welcome the progress made in recent months on economic and trade sovereignty to defend our strategic sectors in investment. This at the Commission's initiative, an important step forward. And on the trade front, I'm sure we'll come back to this, we have a united position based on voluntary joining in, but which also protects our legitimate interests and the interests of our workers and consumers. I believe in this economic sovereignty, which is based on competitiveness, which countries build up through their reforms. There's also, of course, solidarity, which we must develop for economic monetary union. And, of course, we must have a more realistic trade policy. This is all work we must continue with. Sovereignty means climate and energy sovereignty, too. That, too, is essential. We must quickly open up debate to increase the European contribution to implementing the Paris Agreement. We are completing the discussions on the energy and climate package, but it is clear that we must move on to a new phase. A number of you committed to this, and I hope that over the next few months we will reopen the debate on a flat rate or a price for carbon. France is in favor of a minimum price, and France is in favor of a CO2 border tax too. It's not a technical instrument. It's the way to ensure a credible energy transition. The fourth kind of sovereignty we need to take further is health and food. In our policies, in our budget choices of today and tomorrow, we must support food sovereignty, quality food sovereignty. That's what our citizens expect of us. That is what we owe them. It's good for our economies and our regions, and it's also a choice that is consistent with our longer-term commitments. The five area of sovereignty we need to defend is obviously digital sovereignty. Here, I would pay tribute again to your work, which has led to something that crops up in all international debates. It's seen as a reference point in legislative terms. That is the way to protect the personal data of our citizens. For those who wanted illegitimate levels of protection, I would say we are becoming a unique geographical space in the world. We are encouraging groundbreaking innovation, disruptive innovation, but at the same time, we are protecting individual freedom. Finally, this Europe of equality and freedom is based on social values which we proclaimed in Gothenburg. This social Europe is a Europe of the sovereignty of this social basis. Now, of course, there are differences, but let's not feed difference. The meaning of the European adventure is increased convergence. That is why we have have many of us fought very hard to regulate the posting of workers. Parliament has allowed us to improve the compromise reached in compromise, and I welcome the fact that this reform should finally be adopted and implemented. Here I would pay tribute to the work in this House. That's an image of a Europe that is efficient and protective. It's this kind of European sovereignties that need to be built. They must be at the heart of a coherent project and feed into the thinking on the multi-annual financial framework over future years. And I'll conclude on that point. The budget that we're going to discuss must be the expression of a coherent, efficient political project based on convergence. France is willing to increase its contribution. To do that, we need to completely recast the budget. We need to create new own resources. I'm in favor of that on the digital and on certain energy sources. We must get rid of rebate which cannot survive after Brexit. We must provide dignified funding to European funds on defence and migration. We must modernise policies and create conditionalities or convergence criteria on fiscal and social matters. No ambition level should be too high, but we must add new ambitions to this. And so that is what France will be doing over the next few months. We will be working in that direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you will have grasped that as I said, the European Parliament is the seat of European sovereignty, of its responsibility, and indeed of Europe being alive. It is here that the future of Europe is played out. Europe as a grouping of sovereignties that goes hand in hand with an even greater sovereignty, the sovereignty that unites us, a union at the service of peace and solidarities, which offers an area of stability and peace in the world. It is on this that we must anchor a Europe based on the spirit of its peoples. And I hope in future months we will overcome north, south, east, west divides, big versus small. We must overcome this inward-looking nationalist selfishness. I belong to a generation that never experienced war. I am part of a generation that is suffering the luxury of forgetting of the experiences of our ancestors. There are many who today believe we can continue with standard confrontations, the certainties of the past. We got used to them. Well-known divisions, well-organized divisions. But I also come from a family and from a region that has known and experienced all the tragedy of our past. So the choices are clear. I don't want to belong to a generation of sleepwalkers. I don't want to belong to a generation that's forgotten its own past, that refuses to see the torments of its present. Everybody must assume their responsibility. And I want to belong to a generation that has taken the firm choice to defend its democracy. It's not a word that we should become used to. It's a word with meaning, because it is something that emerged from the battles of the past.
Je veux appartenir.
I want to belong to a generation that will defend European sovereignty, because we fought to obtain it, because it has a meaning, because it is the condition that will allow future generations to themselves choose their future. And I will not give in to any kind of fixation on authoritarianism or fixation of presence. We need to show a sense of responsibility. And so with that in mind, I want to organize real European debates so that our peoples can make real choices. Those who don't want Europe, who want a Europe that doesn't propose anything, a Europe that just carries on regardless. No, We want a Europe that is based on a living democracy, a Europe that we believe in, the Europe that we do believe in. Thank you.